There is a recording in progress. I don't know if you just heard her interrupt me, but she did.
Hmm.
And I'm
It's
this.
recording, even though it didn't.
Yeah, it's recording. I
Yeah.
see the button.
Amy, do you need to say something?
No, I was just noting that I didn't hear the beep, but I think it is recording.
Okay, I think I heard it. So I'm the business director of Women in Film, and we're so happy that everybody's here tonight to join us this evening for our Fall Women in Film San Francisco Bay Area 2022 event, Conversations and Connections. I'm so happy you guys are all here. And I'd like to do a big shout out to Karen Larson, an associate, for being our community partner. She's always so great about making sure she really supports us, and we really would like to just give her a big shout out. And I'd like to start by recognizing that while we are in cyberspace currently, those of us that are in Oakland or Berkeley or Piedmont, Emeryville and Albany, that in California, that we are on Lishan Ohlone territory. So visit the link in the chat to identify what area that you, Indigenous land, that you may live on. And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And as Carol said, we are recording the event, including the breakout sessions. And
No, not the breakout sessions.
okay, so if you'd like to, you can
You can record it yourself.
and we will not be sharing the video publicly. And I'd like to tell you how to save the chat by clicking on the three dots in the lower right hand side of the chat screen. You can see those dots. Go ahead and click there. And I also, at this point, would like to introduce who is an amazing organizer of tonight's event and just a really great person. Christian um, is, she was part of our board before, and she's still a member, and she really always brings exceptional light and a lot of fun to every one of our events that we have. So, Kristen, welcome, and go for it.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just had a message that said unmute yourself. So, hi everyone. My name is Kristen Tiesh, and I'm so delighted to actually join WISPA or WISPA. Is that how we call it?
I think it's weekday.
WISPA at this great event. I've been working. Well, my short story is that I learned how to edit when I was at graduate school in upstate New York in 1998. And I've pretty much been editing ever since then. I realized very quickly after university that this was a skill that a lot of people needed. And it wasn't one of the most glamorous positions, but it was certainly needed. And somebody who has really great storytelling skills, it was just a great way to make a living in the industry. But yeah, that was 1998 when I learned, and so things were very, very different back then. I think Final Cut 1 hadn't even come out yet, and I learned how to edit, do nonlinear editing on a system called Media 100. What's that? And then now here we are. We use totally different tools. Our workflows are very different. The way we work is different. How we talk to each other about what we're doing is different. How we share information with our teams is extremely different. And so I just figured it would be a great conversation. And Michelle gave a shout out to Media 100. It would just be a great conversation to share our knowledge, with our community here in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, with the WIFS community. And so throughout my career working in post-production, I've met just some amazing women and women identified people who work in post-production and whose work I admire so much. And so that's how I brought this amazing group of panelists together for tonight's event. Yeah. So it's 7:05, and according to the agenda is, do I move on to introducing all the panelists now? Is that okay? I see a head nodding.
Yes.
So what I'll do is, I think I'm just gonna go alphabetically by last name, and I think that Diana Brody is the first person. So if you could just briefly state your name and your pronouns, and I forgot to state mine. Mine are she, her. And then, you know, the industry that you work in, and just maybe like a sentence about yourself. So go ahead, Diana.
Okay, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, good. New microphone. Who dis, right? I am Diana J. Brody. My pronouns are she, her. I am a freelance video editor. I have been freelance for 26 years now here in the Bay Area, with a little bit down in LA and a little bit up in Seattle. Curious where Kristen went to grad school in upstate New York. Where did you go? I meant to ask you. Oh, Syracuse. All right. Yeah, I almost went to Syracuse, but I went to Ithaca for undergrad. So we would have played each other in sports had it been 10 years earlier and you were an undergrad. There you go, the Newhouse School, right? And yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've also recently started a school to help emerging editors and assistant editors learn what they need to learn in order to move up and into the edit chair. So that's been super fun. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I did that later, because it will definitely flow into the topic for today. And that's what I got. That's what I got for y'all. Was there anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was perfect. I think alphabetically next is Julie, Julie Huang. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
Yeah,
Okay.
Julie Huang.
Huang.
It's been used to it, but it's fine. So again, I'm Julie Huang. My pronouns are she, her. I am currently the director of post-production at Actual Films, which is a documentary production company in San Francisco. I've been involved in post-production since around 2012. I guess to say that was like my first paying job as a logger on Insane Coaster Wars for Indigo Films, which I think some of you have like worked for over the years. I was actually an electrical engineer before that. So I've had a very strange, long, winding path throughout my career. I've done a great deal of assistant editing, also editing, and now it's like post-supervising and building out a facility, which was kind of new and a little crazy. But you know, it's been a pretty like good, like broad. I feel like I've touched like many different areas in the entire post process, and I enjoy it a great deal. I love the challenges and like even the fact to some degree how it's changing constantly and how it's changed a lot even in the last 2 years, even this year. So I'm eager to just talk to anyone about that and have a nice discussion.
Thank you so much, Julie. And I will never mispronounce your name. So again, so we're just going to keep moving things along, and I'm just going to encourage everybody once again to keep their responses, you know, just brief to like 1 or 2 sentences. Next would be Annalena Isaacson.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. My name is Annalena. I came to the Bay Area about 20 plus years ago from Sweden. I came here for school, so I went through the BECA program at SF State. And then I just never went back, so I'm still here. After I graduated, I focused on post-production, and I worked at mostly like broadcast, outdoor programming, And then what did I do then? I worked with Kristen a little bit and Link TV, and then I went corporate. I was editing, and then later on I became the manager of the post team. So I think I have about 10 editors on my team. Yeah, that company.
She's the boss. Thanks, Annalena. Next up is Michelle. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Michelle McGarrigan. I use she, her pronouns. I've been editing in the Bay since 2000 something. But I took a little break and worked for Apple Computer for a long time, about 5 years. I helped develop Final Cut Pro. My last project was Final Cut Pro 7, which we all miss deeply. I started editing in high school, and then I just stopped for a bit to make a lot of money, and then came back to make not any money at all. So it's been awesome. I specialize in documentary here in the Bay Area, but I've also worked with a lot of you folks here in this room. So it's been a real privilege, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And last up is Susie Smith. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Susie Smith. I am mostly working in documentary. I have been in the Bay Area for 20 plus 22, 23 years, something like that. I actually was doing video and editing when I came out here, and then I quit for a long time. And then, so I learned on tapes originally, and yeah. And then, so I quit for a long time, and I made jewelry, which is like, so totally something different. And then I came back and I worked in post, and I was the post supervisor at like a little agency that did a lot of like work for Cisco, and those things. And then I went to grad school for doc at Santa Cruz. And then I left doing video professionally again, and ended up being a account person at a design firm, because that's how things go. But then I quit that 5 years ago because I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to work in doc, and I just floundered for a little bit. But I've been assistant editing, associate editing, mostly working with people I want to work with.
It's always rewarding to work with people that you want to work with. So, okay, well, let's just jump right into some of these questions that I have for the panelists. And then I just want to remind people to mute themselves if they're not talking. So let's just jump right in. In early 2020, I got a call regarding my availability to edit a new true crime docuseries. And by late spring, we realized that we would not be going into the office to edit, and a whole new post-production process evolved. So I think by June of 2020, all of the editors were set up to work remotely from their home offices. So I'd like to start with Diana to telling her experience working remotely as she was editing this series with me. So Diana, please start off by explaining how we went remote and how that changed the game for you and for all of us as editors.
Well, the client that the post house that Kristen's referring to, I had worked for probably off and on for a decade, right? Like I would go in and freelance, and it was great post house up in Sausalito, and a small office, and had my own little edit suite, and then that's what I thought we were going to be doing. And then the pandemic hit literally like a few weeks before the start. So I was one of the first editors to start. I think DWAT was the first editor to start, and then I hopped in. And then there was another editor that folks may know here, Nancy Main. She and I went to pick up drives. So they didn't have anything set up at this post house to go remote. And the owner of the post house really, really, really didn't want to go remote. We had to talk her into going remote because it's windowless office. I mean, it has windows, but they don't open. So it's all air conditioning. And as we know, COVID travels through the air conditioning system, which we didn't know at the time, but we had just sort of heard rumors about. So we were very keen on starting remote. So we were going to pick up drives with footage on it. So we went to pick up drives. We were also starting, we had about a month's worth of work prior to starting the true crime series. So we were picking up drives for that small gig before the bigger gig started. And man, I think we wore masks when we were there, but those masks were like the mask, just a piece, might as well just have been a bandana at that time. You know, it was just a piece of cloth with string around it, right? We didn't know anything about anything at that point. We tried to stay 6 feet away from each other, but it's kind of hard in a small office as we were transferring footage. It was all very scary. We were kind of white knuckling it through. And then we had this big, just before the formal kickoff of the series, we had this big kind of come to Jesus talk with the executive producer, where we said, look, by this point, it's April and we know a little bit more about everything. And we said, look, we don't want to go into the office. And the EP was like, okay, so we'll work off of drives for a month and then we'll return to the office. That was the thought. Yeah, this will blow over in a month was the thought, really. And I sort of led the charge on that and said, hey, I don't want to come into the office through the summer of 2020 at the earliest, right? I literally didn't want to come in the office at all now. And the EP was very upset about that, but the other editors were all had kids and were all like, no, we don't want to come in either. We have families, blah, blah, blah. So and she was really, really resistant. And then, so she works all off of PCs. Even though I have a Mac at home, I remoted in off of my Mac to a PC, which worked fine. With literally, I didn't have hardly any problems. I know Kristen's experience starting off was much different with RGS, but she got HP's RGS as a remote option, and we had Jump as a backup, but we didn't really use Jump very often. RGS for me on my edit suite worked flawlessly most of the time. Kristen had a bumpier ride starting out, as I recall. But once that was up and running and in place, I think she saw the beauty behind it. The not having to commute is fantastic, especially in the Bay Area where the commute rivals all the rumors of Los Angeles and then some, really. And everybody was more productive. I think she thought that we wouldn't be able to go in another editor's edit room and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? But we could just send a clip and do the same thing, right? So, or once we were all remote and everything was in the same place, you just send a timeline, put a timeline in their bin and say, what do you think of this? So the collaboration was still there. And that first season, when we all knew each other, we had all worked with each other a bunch, it really felt actually even more like a collaboration, because I started a Slack channel, we were all on the Slack channel, so it really did feel the same. My biggest concern through this whole thing, and Kristen, give me a wrap it up when it's time to wrap it up. Yes, on Avid, right? Yes, sorry. So this was for broadcast. So yeah, this shop is an all Avid shop, regardless of the gig. So even when they do have educational videos or something, they are cutting on Avid. Their Avid, though, I will say, is from 2018, I think, is the latest version, because it's so stable. And now that I've been on the newest version this year, I miss the older version. I'm not really super thrilled with some of the changes. There's some of the changes I love, but other changes I'm like, this seems like you're just trying to look more like Premiere, and this doesn't really have a function. But that's just me. But I've been working on Avid since the Avid 400, since Media Composer even existed, because I too came from linear 3/4 inch tape is my background, and then I had to learn Avid in the early 90s, and that was my first Avid. Was you only got 2 keyframes. That's it. If you wanted to add keyframes, you literally had to add edit, and then you get 2 more keyframes. So I'm old. I'm old
All right,
school.
well, we're not going to get into the
Yeah.
details of
Anyway,
key
right.
framing in this
Of
conversation.
Avid, right. So
I'm sure that all of us editors, would geek out on a keyframing conversation.
right.
But yeah, let's spare those details.
Right.
Now,
So
I would like to hear from some of the managers and directors of Post on how this switch to remote editing affected them in 2020 or beyond.
Let me just say this super quick before I go.
Sure.
This was my wrap up, is that the one concern that I have about remote editing is the assistant editors and the emerging editors, the junior editors, who now are not, I mean, they were being sequestered anyway, slowly but surely over time in their own rooms. But when we were still in the same building, I could pull them in and show them things that they would need to know. And if there's something was slow, I could help them out. And now the concern is, and it's being echoed by assistant editors that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot over the year, that they really aren't getting the opportunities to learn what they need to know. So I love remote editing, and I'm about to, in December, start a gig at Pixar, which is going to be hybrid. Oh, well, thank you. And while I'm super excited about that gig, I'm super sad about a commute and having an edit space that's not exactly to my comfort level. So that is the one. Anyway,
Okay,
there you go.
Well,
Kristen.
congratulations. Yes, congrats on your new gig. And so, yeah, like I was saying, moving on, I'd like to hear from some of the managers like Annalena and Julie about how the switch to remote editing affected them and your teams in 2020 and beyond. How did you set up your remote editing workflows with the editors working from all over with different systems and different Wi-Fi speeds? So maybe Annalena, would you like to start? And then Julie, you can pipe in.
Sure. So I think we were up and running pretty fast. I don't think we had really any downtime, maybe as one day when we picked up the computers from the office. Everyone had similar edit systems, I would say. And we already have editors spread out over different offices. So we are kind of used to, meeting online, even though some are in the office. So it was a little bit a fractured team anyways. So we were kind of used to having that communications. A lot of it happened, over the internet. So we were up and running, I would say, in a day. I think the harder part, and I think where maybe our team really was shining, was the production. I think that was, how do we get, to film people? These are, corporate people, and how can we get them cameras and send things out? So I think that was maybe the challenge, and where they really kind of focused a little bit of effort, and I think they did a marvelous job of just setting up production. So I think it was pretty effortless on the post side. We just did everything on separate hard drives and upload to different Frame.io, and we were using those tools anyways, so it wasn't really a big switch for editors. It was more so for production. I would say it was pretty easy for us.
Julie, did you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I would say that So during the pandemic, I was still like working a lot of independent stuff, and like right when it started, I was working on the Barbara Lee documentary for Abby Ginsburg, and we were like right in the middle of our online. So it was like, and our colorist, Gary Coates, love him, but he decided he was going to ride out the pandemic in Santa Barbara and just like skip town. So we had to like reconfigure like even like how we were going to get material to him, how we were going to like finish this movie. But we made it work. It was through a combination of like Dropbox and drives and like sending projects back and forth. So that was definitely like a good option just to keep going. I then spent like most of 2021 as an editor for Kuhnhart Films in New York. And that was like my first purely like remote system where they actually like bought like the remote system for us and shipped it to us. So we had like monitors, and it was called a thin client, which was like a little small Linux computer that basically only called to New York. And that was, it got some getting used to because like it was a 4-episode series and we were like all spread like all over the entire country. There was definitely like communication challenges, and we missed like just being together to like, even like for the directors or the editors, just to hash out like what the episode should be. And there were like delays and everything. Since 2022, when I started working at Actual again, we've actually like been adopting like basically a hybrid system. So usually people will come into the office 2 days a week. And I live in East Oakland, so sometimes it can take me like 90 minutes to get to the Presidio. And I honestly like would not have considered going back to work at the Presidio if I hadn't been given that option to like work remotely. And we looked at a couple of different options. Jump Desktop seemed by far like the easiest just to deploy quickly for us, and it worked like very well for us, and it was like easy to just like add people. We were using the enterprise version of Jump Desktop for Teams, which gives us like a lot of control on like who can connect, how they connect, and we can just like basically add them. It sends them an email, they join our team. We're working on a project even right now where we hired like an AE who lives in Chicago just because we needed like experienced avid AE, and we had some difficulty finding someone, and he was available. And he started work like 2 days after we hired him, didn't have to like prep a drive for him, didn't have to send him stuff, basically just sent him an email and a login, and he was just on one of our computers at the office attached to the Nexus and working right away. So I mean, I love it. I love not having to drive into work every day and like, be able to sit at home and do it. So I really think like this is the way forward. I like also that I could like cook dinner for my family like on a Tuesday night instead of fighting traffic.
Right.
Yeah,
so there's so many benefits. And I mean, in my opinion, I think this remote editing is here to stay. Why don't we just do a show of hands? How many people think remote editing is here to stay and we're not going back into the office? Okay, well, half of us. And then we got 3.5. But like,
Can I add a quick thing to Diana's concern about like training people? Yes, like I agree with that. It's especially we have some interns in the office, which I've been trying to work with, but I'm not always in the office when they are. But even like in the office, people have gotten really used to like even within the office, like jumping to other computers that are in the office. So we're at the point where most of the time, if someone has a question, I'll just like I'll just jump into the computer they're working on, and I'll just like seize control of the mouse and like show them stuff how to do it. So we're like kind of all in everybody's business.
Hey,
like,
hey. So Michelle, you kind of gave us maybe remote editing is here to say maybe not. I'd love to hear from you and what your opinion is. And then also, I've seen on our Slack channel that for Alliance of Documentary Editors that you have used Premiere Productions. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience using Premiere Productions with a remote team, and then what your opinions on remote editing are, period.
So I've been editing remote for a lot of people, especially indies. So usually it's because the director lives over here and I live here and I have all the footage, and we pass, I pass them cuts to watch on Vimeo or Vimeo. So it didn't change that much from that. The difference is with a larger team, like a series feels different. So last year I did like a sort of a mid-length doc for Pixar, and they're definitely an avid shop, but because they were outsourcing to a lot of different editors, they were willing to work in Premiere. So we had a lot of issues the previous year when the pandemic hit. They had hired a bunch of Premiere editors and we were all cutting on our own machines, and they were putting us in random places at Pixar to cut. And then the day that they were like, Pixar is closed. So we just all took our computers and went home. So it wasn't that bad a transition. It was harder for the directors who couldn't jump from editor to editor in person. So that I think the editors or the directors had the bigger transition problem, just dealing with trying to juggle all these people and trying to figure out what they were working on. So last year it was myself and the director, and this was her only focus. So she was like, and she's also an editor, so she wanted to have her hands in everything, which like after a while you get used to, but like when people start touching your stuff, like the first time, you're like, oh my God, they're touching my stuff, but you get over it. and then when we moved to productions, we had to, because it was so much footage, started getting really slow, like it was just a hot mess. So she would hand me, I would hand her project, she would hand me, we had mirror drives, it was great. We did have to talk to Premiere at some point because we did hit some weirdness with the early versions of productions where it just stopped working, or it just got so slow we couldn't open the bloody thing. So it was like rough those days, but the workflow for productions made sense, especially if you're coming from Avid and you just assume that it's not a project, it's a bin, and it's just a series of bins inside a giant project. It's basically how you see it. The hard part is like, because it's so flexible, you can easily organize yourself into a corner. And so you have to be really mindful of how you're doing things. And especially if you're working with multiple people outside of your area, or, when you're trying to share a project in a cloud, is the cloud fast enough to share said project? Will it host you later? And then just keeping track of versioning, like knowing what version they're working on versus what your version you're working on. We would like the only way we could talk to each other, because what they used to do at Pixar was they would just hang out in the hallway and just chatter to each other. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice. So we had a Zoom room that was open all day, and I would just have it open in the background. And then like, she would come and go, Michelle, I need help. Or like, and then she would like, can you watch this? Do we need to cut this? I'm going to hand this to you so you can fix it. And then we'll go back and forth. So it felt like it was in person for us for a long time. And then towards the end, we had like 2 months of post, because we were having similar issues to what you guys were doing with Gary Coates. So it's just like, our post people are way down here. We have to get them a lot of 6K footage, which, just a hot tip, don't shoot in 6K, please, ever. It's terrible. Anyway, so yeah, it's been, I think we're doing well from this transition.
And then we haven't heard from Susie yet. As an assistant editor, and it's something that Diana was mentioning earlier, how has this whole experience affected you and your work and your ability to learn and connect with your team?
Well, I was already mostly remote. And I'm working on, indie docs. So I had done, I have worked a lot with Christina Matwani, and so we had worked mostly remote with each other already, but when we can still be in person then, so we were used to each other. And then I was starting to work, and it was like hybrid. So at the beginning of the pandemic, before it started, I had just started working on a homeroom with Pete Nix, so I would go to his office a few days a week, but mostly I was at home. So it wasn't that bad for me when it started. I just worked from home, and we're hybrid, not hybrid, we're remote, but we were all in the Bay, so we shuttled drives around, we did Dropbox, which I hate, but it's been pretty simple, and now several movies later, still doing it like that. I like it. In terms of being an assistant editor, I think the thing is, I learned tape to tape back in the day. I learned the original Avid back, and then I left for a long time, and I had to relearn everything on Final Cut, and then I left, and I had to read. So I feel like I'm a little, and I was a post supervisor for several years at a little production company in San Francisco. So I kind of knew a lot of stuff already about organizing. I just had never done feature doc work. So for me, it was more working on the indie doc, learning about the story, things like that. And I haven't really had a problem, but again, like I'm assistant editing and learning at a later stage in my career, I guess. So I'm good at learning things, and Christina and I have a great relationship, so we just talk all the time. And I mean, sometimes we have hour-long Zoom calls, hours-long Zoom calls, but that's fine, like I'm talkative.
Okay, so I just want to do a little check-in for time. In this big room, we have about 13 minutes left, and so I want to get to a few other topics. One of the things that I learned about and discovered during the pandemic was the Alliance of Documentary Editors. And I know a few people on the panel and some people attending this event are already members, but I'd love to pass the mic to Michelle, who I think you're on the steering committee, or I just see your name a lot when I'm in the Slack. If you could just tell us more about this amazing organization, and please share with us what Alliance of Documentary Editors is and why everyone interested in post or working in post should become a member.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so I'm no longer on the steering committee, but I was. So the Alliance of Documentary Editors is very specifically about documentary, but obviously everybody has edited a lot of different things. So it's more about talking about the volume of footage that we're talking about in a typical documentary, talking about how industry works with series, especially the new docuseries stuff that's coming out that's really hot right now. So they originally had set up themselves as they were all in LA. They had one person had gotten this email that said, "Hi, I need an editor to work 12-hour days for the foreseeable future. Here is your tiny rate." Everybody freaked out, started emailing each other and yelling about it. And then they were like, we should just get together and hash this out and talk about it. And how are we going to respond to this? And so those core people started to meet in person. And then there were a bunch of New York people that started to meet in person. Pandemic hit and everybody couldn't meet anybody anywhere. So that was when Alliance of Documentary Editors kind of exploded in terms of all of a sudden there was no barrier to entry. It became virtual mostly. And it used to be that you had to have a feature film credit as an editor in order to get in. And through a lot of advocating from the Inclusion and Access Committee, that was taken out. And that's partially how I got in. So I'm very active with the Inclusion and Access Committee, and our mission is to make editing equitable, both, behind the computer and in front of the computer. So, getting more folks from marginalized communities into the post, and then making sure that the films that are being created about people in marginalized communities have some representation on their team or have some accountability with that. From those communities. So so we put out a scheduling guideline, which some of you may or may not have seen. It came out a year and a half ago. Put some links in the chat here. And the scheduling guideline is a very basic guideline of this is how long it really takes to make an indie film, to make a docuseries. and the basic rule of thumb was 10 minutes of content takes about a month, and that's basic. And that's like, you don't know what that content is. That content could be 99.9% archival that you had to source yourself, or you can have a team of archivists that are doing that for you. Vice versa, it could be a person who has a story producer who is creating all their paper edits, and they have 3 weeks to create a rough cut for an hour show. Like, you never know, but it's a place to start, and that's where we're putting our kind of bar. And then there's also things like the BIPOC editors database, which I'll also send to you guys. That was started by a few people that are in ADE, but basically it's just another way of creating visibility for BIPOC editors specifically. There's a hiring section to that. There's also just a way to upload your information and to tell people that you're available to edit. And we're working on things like the documentary editor recognition committee, which Heidi is on, Heidi here in our room, which is amazing. It's just sort of about realizing that an editor, especially on a documentary, is also somebody who does a lot of writing, who helps to tell the story of a film, because you don't start with the script, right? So who is writing the story? And so when your director gets a writer credit and your editor doesn't, what does that mean? So that's a lot of discussions that are happening within our community right now. And the DIRC, which we call JIRC, they're sort of highlighting that, and they're also helping to create panels that are going to major film festivals like Doc NYC and Getting Real. And they're also creating these video modules, which are really fun and really great for festivals. The last ones they did were for South by Southwest. So a bunch of editors had gotten films that they were working on into South by Southwest. So they created these little interviews about, what it took to create those films, what their process was in basic terms, and then just sort of kind of talking about a topic. So they'll be working on something like that. I feel like, can I say, they're working on some stuff like that for Doc NYC, which is coming up in a few weeks. So stay tuned for that. And we have a social media setup, which is Instagram, Twitter. Those are our places, but we're really hottest on Instagram right now. So if you just want to hang out and watch us on Instagram, the only thing we ask for entry is that you are an editor, assistant editor, post-production person hopefully that is interested in documentary or is leaning towards documentary or has cut documentary, or is somebody who's just trying to get into the industry in that respect. And then we have a really nice sort of orientation process that we put people through who are coming in, so that they get introduced to the community, and it's more personable than just letting them into Slack and saying good luck. So it's like a little guide. I'm one of those people that might guide you to come in. So yeah, we're trying to create community within. We're trying to, empower people outside of our community to understand what an equitable process is and what a fair schedule could be. So
thanks. Yeah. So we still have about 7 more minutes before we go into breakout rooms. I'm going to skip ahead a couple questions. One of the things that I love about the ADE Slack channel is that you can have all of the conversations that you were afraid to talk about. And you can have all of them. And one of them is salary. And, it's just eye-opening sometimes when I look at, what other people say they're making. And I was like, wait, why didn't I ask for that? But let's talk about salary. Is it okay to talk about salary? Can we talk open about it? And what are some salary ranges for those starting out in the fields, like as an AE, as an editor, and what is something that you can aspire to as a more seasoned professional? Why don't let's go around the room, and I'm just going to go clockwise the way that I'm seeing. So let's start with Diana. Why don't you pipe in about this?
Yeah, I think everybody should be talking about their rate with everybody else all the time. That's the only way that it's going to work. You got to talk. If you're an AE, if you're an editor, I don't care what part of the process you're in, talk about your salary with each other. I found out mid-pandemic that I was making 150 less a day than a guy who was doing less than I was and had less experience than I did in the genre. And so I had to once again go to the mat and and I found that out only because I sussed it out, and then I pinged him over Slack and was like, is this what you're making? He was like, yeah, I came down to that rate. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So just make sure that because we're not in the office together, right? Just make sure that everybody's getting paid fairly, and have these conversations all the time, all the time, all the time. Before I take a job, I always ping someone if I know somebody who's worked for that post house or in that area, and I ask them what rate they were getting. And most of the time they'll say what their rate was and what the rate should be now. So you know, even people, you know, where you're working for a post house you've worked for a ton, it's surprising. And I've probably had to have this conversation with almost every gig I've ever done, almost everyone. So yeah, keep
Yeah.
talking about it, and do not, and don't eat, no matter how desperate you are, don't take that crap rate for way too much work. You know, like, call me and let me help you. You know, like, really, it just hurts everybody when someone's like, oh yeah, I'll do like, I talked to an AE who got a chance to be a full editor. This was a woman who was in New York, and when she got into the edit chair, they paid her for broadcast show like $375 a day. And that was the only way she could get out of being an AE. And I'm like, I totally get it. Please don't take that rate ever again.
Yeah, so let's hear from the AEs, or the people who have been AEs. I know, Julie, you're not an AE anymore, but Susie, you still are an AE. I would love to hear about you and your experience with trying to get the rate that you think that you deserve for the work that you do, because AEs do a lot of work, and props to AEs. I love you guys.
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, so I have like spent most of my career as an AE. I think there's just because we're in the Bay Area too, and like the union is not a strong presence here, that also kind of makes, and there's also like so many different like levels between like commercial, corporate, documentary, like the rates are, I think, just skewed like all over the place. But having said that, I feel like the AE role, especially in the Bay Area, is not like, it's not as present as it is like, say, in New York or LA. Like it is viewed more as like an introductory like position, which it can be, but like at the same time, like even though you may be called an assistant editor, you're doing like, the ones who have a lot of experience are doing like complete workflow management. They're basically doing all sorts of stuff to like just keep the project going, keep the editors working. A good AE can really like make or break like a project, a series. Like, you know, it can be like incredibly painful or incredibly smooth based on how the AE is. And you know, if you look at union rates, you know, MPEG's rates for an AE, it's $2,200 a week, and most of the AEs in the Bay Area aren't making close to that. Like I can guarantee it, you know, and it makes it difficult too, because even someone who could be a good AE, then like they are, you know, moving more towards like the editor side just to make more money, you know. And part of it too, I think, is just like, you know, I feel like a lot of the editors, even who are working as editors, are doing a lot of the AE work themselves too, you know. So that's just like the mishmash. Like if it was just like, if we could develop like a good, more solid AE base, like in the Bay Area, though I've said it a while and I don't know. And like I said, we had to hire someone from Chicago on this last project, you know, and that's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have one more minute. Yeah, we got one more minute before we move on to our next section of the event. So if anybody has anything pressing that they want to say about salary, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to unmute themselves and Anyone? Okay. All right. I think right now what we wanted to do is move on to showing some clips. And the first up is actually, Julie, you just spoke. So let's go to Michelle first, and then we'll go back to Julie. But Michelle, you had a clip that you wanted to share from Embrace the Panda. And Amy, are you the one that's going to be sharing? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and play the clip, and then how many minutes do we have to talk about each one of the clip afterwards? 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
It's 10 minutes altogether. So
10
if
minutes
there's
altogether.
4
Oh,
clips,
okay.
that's like 30 seconds of talking.
All right, well, let's show the clip, and then we'll have like a very short brief commentary afterwards. I'm going to shut up. Everybody mute themselves.
Everyone seeing it?
Yes.
The number one rule in my family: honor your parents. They're the supreme beings who gave you life. The least you can do in return is every single thing they ask.
I think both of us probably grew up under a lot of pressure to, make our parents proud.
Yeah, I had that pressure on myself. Like, I was very high strung. I was really into good grades. I was into the image of the perfect girl.
I never asked for anything. My whole life I've been her perfect little May. Temple duties, grades,
violin, tap dancing.
Yeah, we've been so good. If they don't trust us anyway, then what's the point?
May's struggle in this film is she's torn between being her mom's good little daughter and embracing her like wild inner beast. That is a universal struggle that a lot of kids go through, especially I think immigrant kids. There's definitely like more of this obligation to carry on your family's legacy and make sure that their sacrifices in coming to a new country aren't in vain, but also you're in a new country, you're experiencing all of this crazy, awesome stuff that maybe your parents didn't get to grow up with. You're caught between two worlds, and that's kind of what I wanted to explore in May. And also like literally caught between being like a human girl and a panda.
I immigrated to the US when I was 10, and my mom is very much in her Eastern roots. And when I came here, I was the good little Chinese girl that I knew how to be. And then as I get more and more exposed to the Western culture and what it means to be an American teenager, my mom and I started to butt heads. I had to discover how to bridge the gap between being a dutiful daughter, faithful to myself, and a good friend.
So just for context, this is a making of the film Turning Red that came out of Pixar last year. The difference on this beat behind the scenes was that it was more about the women who were working on the film than it was about the film. We were using the film to kind of communicate what the themes were that they were talking about. So the two women that you see there is Domi Shi, who's the director of the film, and Rona Liu, who's the production designer. And they're both the main women, and they were both Chinese Americans. They were talking a lot about their background and their immigrant family experience. So the edit was really delicate in that we had to obviously feature a lot of clips from the film in order to make Disney happy, but we were also trying to give it an interesting aesthetic in order to deal with all the archival that we had access to. So we had amazing archival coming out from each of these women that were in the film. They gave us all of their teenage photos and their whatever videos they had, which was amazing. So, and we didn't want it to be like the traditional sort of Ken Burns push in, push out situation. So we spent a lot of time shooting practical. So putting all those photos out, putting moves on them, but shooting those moves. And so it was a lot of like back and forth of like, which photo do we need? What's the timing on it? How do we cut around it when we don't get the timing, that kind of thing. So it was a really technical edit. And there were just a lot of, there was a big chorus of voices in there. We had 4 main subjects in the film. So that's it.
That's great. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. That was really cool and great job. Sorry, I live on a very busy street, so sirens going by. I'm going to mute myself in a second, but let's play the clip that Julie shared.
It's coming.
Hearing sound.
We're here. Nice job. All right, here we go. We're going for 10. We're almost all over 85, with the oldest being 92. I got involved in 1998. I've been with them ever since. And if you've ever seen pregnant manatees play, you've seen us play. We don't move too fast, but we have fun. Marge, she'll be 90 soon. You can't stop her shots. With that overhead shot she has, you can try all you want, but no, you can't. Marge, this is you. When I started to play again in '94, my childhood friends thought I was nuts. Money in the bank. You could break an arm, break a leg. You know, I said, but I still want to try. I love the game. Okay, here we go, Grace. We're going for 10, we got 1. There's 2. Grace is a marvel. She's 92. Grace is getting a lot better at passing when she can't make it, because they usually just really guard her close. But she's an excellent shooter. Corey, she knows that drop pass of hers is unbelievable. But if she's anywhere near that basket and had the ball, she'd put it up. Our coach, she's got the biggest heart, and she's got the patience of Job.
Splash is the oldest team in the Senior Women's Basketball Association. They have a competition about that. They want to be the oldest person in the team, so that's why Grace is kind of the queen. The league is a group of women 50 and up. We have games all throughout the year, but also we travel around the country to play national senior games. Splash has won 6 gold medals, a couple of bronze.
We don't have any set plays like we used to have, you know. Now that I even remember it. So it's just improvise. You make it up as you go along.
1, 2, 3. Splash!
Okay, come on.
Bravo.
I thoroughly enjoyed that.
So I want to give props to Alyssa Fideli, who's the editor of that short, and our AE Ellie Wen is actually in this event right now as well. So that was like one of my first like post supervising jobs, like an actual this year. And it was something we did for ESPN for their Title IX celebration earlier this year. It was the 50-50. You can watch the whole thing on Google. And it was just like in documentary, especially, it was just a nice break from like murder shows and like rape and sexual abuse, you know. We got to just spend some time with like these wonderful women. And it was also like Actual usually does lots of feature documentaries, but it's the first time we kind of did something short for TV. And it was actually like a very nice experience all around, and it just brought a smile to everyone's face.
So cool. And so we have one more clip that we're going to show. Sorry about the sirens. So we're going to go to Diana J. Brody's clip. And then so we'll show first, talk later.
No.
This is a first-degree premeditated slaughter of 2 people.
There's a big story here. You know, it's sort of a big human tragedy here.
But you heard about some of the things that he liked to do to his little boy.
Good lawyering in the first Menendez case. Good lawyering. Give the jury a reason to doubt.
After 19 days of deliberation, Judge Stanley Weisberg declared a mistrial in the Eric Menendez murder case after the deadlocked jury failed to reach a verdict.
Now, Lyle's jury says it is deadlocked as well.
I recall shaking my head. I said, wow, what happened?
Los Angeles District Attorney Gil
Sorry.
Cassidy has
Shouldn't
already
happen.
vowed to retry the case.
There was a sense, you know, of desperation in the DA's office.
Uh-oh.
What's going on with him today?
Something that we have asked the judge to do. is to
It's
limit
playing somewhere.
Yeah.
Guys.
This is when we need an AE to jump in.
Sorry.
The perfect self-defense. Then you had nothing.
Okay, so maybe Amy, why don't you mute yourself? And maybe what we can do, so sorry, you got a little sense of the type of true crime shows that Diana and I have been working on. You know, so yes, Diana, why don't you just talk like just real briefly, because we need to go into the breakout rooms anyway now.
Sorry, Diana.
Yeah. And
no
then maybe
worries.
if we have time, we can show the full clip at the when we come back to our main room after.
Oh, if you've seen one rape and murder, you've seen them all. This was the interesting thing about working on this. This was a 5-part series on narrated by Eric Menendez from prison over the phone, and there were no writers on the show. There were 3 editors. And we read every transcript, everything that Eric Menendez said over, oh my God, 30, 40, 50 phone calls. And we were just given like, here's the 35,000 foot view of this scene. This is what we want in this scene. And then the editor constructed all of that with, you know, even though we got a front credit, which was nice, we did not get any writing credits. And the 3 of us wrote the entire series.
Well,
so,
fantastic.
Yeah, it was hard work, and we got 6 months to do the 5 episodes total. So it was a nice chunk of time. Didn't feel rushed like the stuff that Kristen and I have been editing, which is a 15-day to fine cut, essentially. Edit for a 44-minute show, which is just mind-bogglingly awful.
Kind of crazy.
So yeah, but so I'm all for getting writing credits. That's my point, and I'm sticking with it.
Okay, so so the clip that I was going to show, I think what we might end up doing is showing it in our breakout room, because we're going to move on to breakout rooms now, and
well, actually, we have a little bit of time for a Q&A in case people want to ask a question about the clips they just saw or before they go into the breakout rooms.
Oh yeah, and if people have questions for anybody, you know, then they'll be able to figure out which breakout room they want to go into. So yeah, so if you have a question, you can use the raise hand feature like I just demonstrated here. That would actually be the easiest way, because I can't see everyone. And then I would imagine that one of the other moderators can keep track of who has their hands raised. So please go ahead and start raising your hands. If you have questions, you can also write a question into the chat and we can read that out loud. So, you know, I'm sure somebody has questions. No? Well, I have more questions. And then while you guys are all thinking about your questions, I will ask this other question. One of the things that I've always wondered is it still worth it to join the union? Is that something that we need to do? You know, is with the remote editing now and you know, just the opportunities. There's like corporate opportunities and there's TV opportunities, there's documentary opportunities. Is it still something that we should think about? Anybody want to comment on their panel? Nobody has an opinion about this. I'm just going to say that I looked at it just yesterday, and for an editor to join the Motion Picture Editors Guild Union, it costs $3,900. Yeah. So, you know, it's one of those things that I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I've gone for 20 years or plus, or I don't even know how many years. I'm losing count because I'm old. Without having to join the union, and I'm not sure if it's even worth it for me. So I don't know if anybody else has anything to say about that.
I know nothing about the union really, but I do know that somebody who I helped kind of teach editing long ago too, who's far surpassed me and is editing down in LA, a lot of Disney Plus, it was important for her to join the union. I feel like it's worked out well for her.
We have a question from Kip, who says, I'm starting a new doc project after making a couple short narrative films. What can I do to make my editor's job easier? Well, the first thing that I'm going to say is you should hire an assistant editor, because as an editor, it just, you know, I don't think I could do my job the way that I do it without an assistant editor helping me organize the project, helping me troubleshoot, helping me look for things, you know, when I need them. And I just think your project's going to be much better when you have somebody who is in that role. That would be my word of advice. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they want to add.
I would say even before that, like, fix as much stuff in pre-production as you can. So like, I'm talking like slates, if not slates, time code, like jammed time code, you know, pay attention to like what you're shooting, the audio, all that. I've had many painful doc situations where I was given a pile of footage with no time code and no notes and no log, and it was just a lot of extra time. You know, it's just like burning money that would have been fixed just by like setting a setting on your camera and like having someone just jot down notes in the field.
That is very true. Julie asks, what's a fair hourly rate or a monthly rate? So I don't think that editors really work at like an hourly rate. I think, you know, what you're really talking is like a day rate. Michelle says that she works at an hourly rate. Okay, I mean, what you mostly hear is like a day rate or like a weekly rate. So anybody else? I mean, I think, you know, if you're looking anywhere from like $600 to $800 a day for an editor, I'm gonna throw that number out there. Assistant editors, what do you think is a fair rate? Assistant editors, what do you think is a fair rate?
I would agree with what Michelle said. Depends on what your content, depends what you're doing, very much.
Yeah, and experience too. Yeah, but I definitely just to throw out there, like there's like Facebook groups now that basically have set a minimum for job postings at $250 a day. So that's minimum. If you have like, as you go up in experience, it should be a lot more than that. And again, I mentioned again, like the union scale minimum for AEs is 2,200. So that's also
2,200
like
a week.
A week, yeah.
Yeah. And Michelle wrote minimum 400 a day would be nice for an AE, which I agree with.
Yeah.
And let's
real quick, let's talk about what a day means, because that's a hot topic. Because like for normal human beings that don't work in film, an 8-hour day is an 8-hour day, right? We love those. But what I find is that people are assuming 10-hour days. More and more of us are pushing back on that because you like physically can't focus for that long, honestly. Part of why I charge hourly is because I work from home, I have kids, I can't sit for 10 straight hours at my desk and also feed my family and find them and get them home. So I just was like, I will charge you for the hours I'm working for your day. I will meet your deadline and you will pay me what I'm worth for those hours that I'm there. So, but if I'm in house, like, yeah, maybe you could pay me to sit for 10 hours. But definitely check all your contracts. I never get one, but I've heard a lot of people get contracts that are 10, 12-hour days, which is utterly ridiculous. And these are definitely for AEs for sure. Like they're pushing AEs hard, especially on these like Netflix shows. So
That's
check
true.
every piece of fine line in your contract.
Okay, so save some of these questions for people, and hopefully you've gotten a little bit of a feel of the panelists and who you'd like to talk to a little bit more, because we're going to move into breakout rooms now. You know, my breakout room, the editor on the documentary that I'm currently producing and directing is here, and she and I will talk. Her name's Heidi Zimmerman, and she's amazing. And she and I are going to be talking in the main room. So if you want to hang out with me and Heidi, you can hang out in the main room. We're going to be talking about the director-editor relationship and how to hire an editor if you're a director, like, you know, some tips. And why don't we just go through like and give like a 10-second blurb on what you think you might be talking about in your breakout room. So Diana, why don't you go first?
Sorry, I just opened the rooms. I thought
you did.
I believe I did. Do people see rooms?
I don't see.
I see people's
you can-
names.
There's breakout room at
Oh,
the
here it is
bottom.
on the bottom.
And then you can, if you click on that, you can choose which room.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Button to the right that says join. So those panelists can go, if they can join those rooms where they see their names, and then anyone who wants to join whichever panelist.
Okay,
join the room
go
with
ahead and
their name.
join. And you can find out what you're in. And can people switch rooms if they decide they want to be in a different room?
Yes.
Yeah, so they can leave the room. There's a little button at the bottom. If you leave the meeting, you'll get shot out of Zoom and you'll have to log back in. But if you leave the room, you'll come back to the main room.
Main room. Okay.
And you can put in the chat where you want to go.
Got it.
And we'll manually put you there.
Okay, so see you guys all in a half an hour.
Okay.
All right, well, I think everybody joined a breakout room.
Kristen, we don't have a room, right? I figured
Okay,
that.
oh no, there's some, okay, we got it. We've got
22 people in the main room.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got
People are still figuring out where they want to go.
Christina, Kelly, Emily, and Kip are in the main room. So welcome. First I'm going to do is I'm going to give Heidi a chance to tell us who she is and introduce herself. Introduce herself because she hasn't had a time to speak yet. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Heidi Zimmerman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm actually, I didn't put it earlier, but I'm on Cowlitz Clackamas land, which is Portland, Oregon, northeast Portland, because it changes. Anyways, yeah, I work in documentaries. I've been cutting documentaries for over a decade now. It's pushing 15 years. And I've worked remotely for about 10 years. So I have a lot of experience of working remotely. I used to be based in Los Angeles, and I decided I couldn't take traffic anymore. And so I moved to Portland, and I thought, well, I guess I'll never edit again. Who would possibly hire me? And then I found out that people do work remotely, and it started from there. And then the pandemic happened, and I was already set and ready to go, except for the childcare thing. Anyways, yes, I have a lot of experience in that, and I'm working remotely with Kristen on her film.
So let me just, I was going to talk about how to hire an editor, some tips on finding an editor that you'd like to work with. And I'll just tell you my experience. I was at a film festival called the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. It's in Nevada City, California. And I love orcas and I love all marine life. And so I wanted to see the film about orcas. And there was a film called Damned to Extinction. And I went to watch it and I just really enjoyed it. And as an editor myself, I was watching this film and I just said, wow, whoever edited this film is really good because and Heidi was the editor. I found her, I just looked her up after watching the film. I just thought she did a great job of weaving like a really complicated subject matter that was about, so it was about these dams in Idaho that were stopping the flow of fish, of Chinook salmon. Is it Chinook salmon? Sockeye salmon? Chinook salmon to the Puget Sound. And so then the resident orcas in the Puget Sound are going extinct as a result of these dams in Idaho. And the whole, story is very political and it's very complicated, but she did a great job of telling this political story and blending these amazing, natural beauty shots in. So it was all this footage of the orcas, swimming in, in these waters in Washington, and then, the story, being all, rooted in Idaho. So I thought it was a complicated story and she did a great job cutting in all these beautiful natural scenes. And this is kind of the story that I'm telling. So I am telling a story about how bats in North America are going extinct. I wore a bat dress for you all tonight. So there's 3 species of bat going extinct in North America, and there's all different reasons, that they are going extinct. The main one is white nose syndrome, which is a disease that's killing bats and just completely wiping out certain colonies. And so we're following these 3 scientists. Well, it started out with 3 scientists. So we're following these scientists who are really working towards a solution. And it's going to also be a very complicated story. And that's how I decided I wanted to work with somebody who I'd already seen her work. And I thought like she did a great job doing, telling the story. And she had a similar editing style as I have. So when I saw her work, it spoke to me, and I just knew that I wanted to work with Heidi. So before we go on and tell more about like our own experience, I want to go around the room and talk to the people that are here in the room and hear from you. And you can tell me who you are, tell us who you are, and where you are, what you do, in the film and television or media industry. And yeah, so let's see. First person is, I'm just going to go left to right as I'm seeing it, Christina McKinley.
Hi, my name's Christina. I am a board member with SPA. I am a producer at Sky Dojo Media. Sorry, the name like flew out of my head. And I am here just to like broaden my perspective on post, and we have an in-house editor that is kind of new, and I'm really hoping to kind of like pass some of this information on to him, just to like get him as good as he can be. We make documentaries, so that all this talk about documentary style editing is like super, super valuable. So really looking forward to passing this along to him.
Great. Kelly, you're next.
Hi, I'm Kelly White. I'm a producer and script supervisor primarily. So I'm in development on a feature film, a limited series, actually 2 features on a limited series for on the producer side, and then script super. And I've done a number of short films in the last couple of years. And then script supervising wise, I've done a number of shorts as well, and then 2 features so far. So I'm kind of but I'm still fairly new to script supervising, so I'd kind of love to hear any tips from editors on what notes might we be missing, or what are what's helpful to you with the notes, and what's TMI. There's a lot that we track. I use Scripty, so that helps with a lot of stuff, I think. But any tips or ideas for scripted? I'm primarily focused scripted, so.
Okay, cool. We'll think about that. I don't know how I have too much scripted experience. I'm mostly documentary as well. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Emily Meehan. Thanks so much for this really interesting panel. And it's great to get to hear from people who are editing, because I edit and I'm making a feature film. I'm almost finished with it. But I never, ever talk to any other editors except one AE that works on reality shows in Hollywood. So hearing from y'all is extremely helpful to me. I am just doing scripted editing of this movie that I directed, and we're almost finished. So I know how much time it takes, and arranging time code and all the syncing issues and the pre-production things. And I'm hoping that later when I finish this movie, which I'll finish in editing in March, that I can edit indie films for people, like feature films, because I really like scripted editing. So.
Very cool. Well, we have two scripted people in the house. Wendy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I was a freelance video producer for many years for corporate work, industrial work. I did everything except write the scripts. I had a person that would write scripts because he was a technical writer, and that was his strength. And otherwise, I did the camera work, the editing, the sound recording, and I at the time was living in the Midwest, and then I moved to the Bay Area. And because my husband got a teaching position there, we both moved there. And I worked remotely. Basically, I would do all the editing at home, but my scriptwriter and I would meet at whatever plant we were going to record at, and it could be most of the places were in the Midwest, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, and so on. And then at a certain point, my husband's, who's a composer and musician, his work with teaching and running his music business was starting to get overwhelming. So I started becoming his manager, and that took over more and more of my time. But over the pandemic, he and I started working on a number of creative projects that have been exhibited at performance venues in different parts of the world. And that's been really an exciting turn. So, but I'm interested right now in pursuing work as a music supervisor because of my many years of working with my husband's career and all the people that we've met. I have a lot of experience working with licensing and royalty organizations, and I have a lot of, and my years of editing too. I understand pacing and tempo and tone. And music is a passion of mine, not as a musician, but as an appreciator. So,
cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's thank you. Yeah, let's hear from Sarah. Sarah, can you please, I'm sorry, pronounce your name for me?
It's Sarah. Yeah, you got it. I'm Sarah. I'm a writer, director, mostly fiction, but also a full-time professor at a community college in the Bay Area. So I teach editing, but I'm not doing a lot of editing myself these days, which is not good. And so I'm just trying to stay current and always be like, oh yeah, what are people doing these days with editing? Because I don't have time to take on my own editing work. But I love editing. It's nice. This has been a really informative panel. Thanks.
Muted myself. That's great. So so now that I know who's here, it sounds like Heidi and I might be the only people in documentary. And the rest of you sound like you're working more on scripted. There's music. Nina has her hand up. Nina, you joined the room, so please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Kristen. I'm Nina. My actual name is Nandini, but I go by Nina.
Okay.
So yes, I'm also an editor, writer, director, producer, a bunch of things on my own short films and a couple of other collaborative ventures. And I'm also an actor, a voiceover, and a dancer. So I'm in front of the camera as well, oftentimes. But my question was for documentary filmmaking, which I've done only a short film once before, and now, which was my own, but now I am on board with a feature film for a music. It's a documentary about a musician, and so the person has asked me to be the editor and voiceover person for that. But it's his first time filmmaking. It's an independent film, and he's actually a professor of something else. And so I'm trying to help him put the screenplay together because he has the whole idea in his mind about the musician. And so as a role of an editor, I understood y'all mentioned how oftentimes we don't have a script and we're actually scripting it as we edit, right? So I don't know. I mean, in what way can I organize his script for him when he doesn't have it all put together yet? Is that a question that is appropriate in this room, or is that?
Yeah, it's a narrative, not a documentary, right?
No, it is a documentary.
Okay, so it's a documentary. So he's gone out and he filmed interviews and.
Exactly. And he has a lot of B-roll with music and interviews and performances.
Yeah. Well, first you need to get those interviews transcribed.
Right. Exactly.
Time code. Yeah. So
Yes.
first you need to get the interviews transcribed. And I also, before I go on, I want to apologize that I didn't have it on gallery view. I had it on speaker view. So I only saw that there were 5 people originally. Now I realize there's like a lot of people in this room. And after we answer Nina's question, we'll go and we'll do short introductions so people can, be heard.
To get everybody.
Yeah, so we can get everybody. But and Julie says, doesn't Adobe have transcription? Yes. So
Okay.
so if you're working in Adobe Premiere,
no, I've used only Final Cut, but I suppose it might have the same.
Yeah, so newer versions of Premiere, there's like a transcription tool within the program. Okay. And if you are working on Final Cut or something else, I also, as a director, I like having like a document, that is kind of like a paper that I can look at and read without being inside of the edit program. I just find it very helpful because I can then, take like a sentence here and a sentence here and piece them together. It's just kind of like a nice visual. And in fact, I've hired Heidi to work on another project that I did, that I produced for a friend. And it was an interview with her and her husband about fentanyl. And it was like an 1.5-hour interview. And I had it transcribed, and then from the transcription, I just went and pulled, the selects, and then I sent the selects to Heidi, and then she put it together into a very long 22-minute assembly cut for an 8-minute video, so anyway, so then we had to, cut it down, but just having like a document that we could, both go and refer to, I thought was really helpful. A document with time code, obviously. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Can I say something about Adobe transcripts? Because I pretty much primarily use them. They're not accurate. And so you will have to correct them yourself or hire somebody to correct them. And if you want to print out of like a transcript, or I mean, you can assign speakers and all that, and that's great, but it's a lot of work. Somebody's got to do that work. But I like having it in the software because oftentimes what I'm using it for is when I remember things that I want to put in, or if I need to do word replacement, like I know we have a clean the somewhere, where can I find it? But I do think it's important to have transcripts that the director can look at, and the ones that Adobe is currently with aren't that. And if anybody has an accent, forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. And even, even with these like other transcription software, softwares that are out, they always get words wrong, especially when they're bat species. It's, the Latin terms, anyway, so you always have to go through and read your transcripts and, correct, the mistakes and stuff. Let's go around real quickly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next would be Elizabeth Thomas. You want to just do a quick intro? Elizabeth, are you here? Or are you just in the background? Okay, well, moving on. Lou Levinson, would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe not. Maybe they're just people who are listening while they're making dinner. Amy Zins, are you here? Nope. And Kristen Sherman Olms.
Yes, hi, I'm Kristen Sherman Olness. And I wanted this to be in this breakout room because I'm in a position where I have edited a feature documentary, and I want somebody to kind of help me with the polishing. And so I'm a little bit afraid to ask an experienced editor, because here they're getting something they didn't have creative control over. And so I don't know how they'll feel about that. And also I'm financing the whole thing myself. And so I'm on a limited budget. And I do need somebody who can also do supervision, because my problem is that I've had this man volunteer to do the sound editing in New York City. I'm in Oakland, and he's a bigwig, and I don't know what the workflow is. So I don't see how I can continue on as the editor, because I don't understand how to do the job going forward.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm just going to start off saying, that like for me, as I'm an editor, and I refuse to edit any of my own films, because I so appreciate having a second set of eyes. I enjoy creative collaboration, and I always think that another really creative, talented person that I'm working with is going to have some ideas that I never even thought of, and usually these other voices and other perspectives just make the film better. So I appreciate the fact that you want to bring in an editor for polishing, and I highly recommend doing that. It is going to be challenging, because I've definitely been brought in as like a polishing or a finishing editor on a documentary before. And, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without sounding like a horrible person, but, sometimes, I just don't think the story is there, or the characters haven't been developed. So I'll insist on some changes. And then often the director is like, well, that's not my vision, Well, and at that point, I would just say, well, then maybe I'm not the right editor for you. I can only speak for myself. I'm a very character-driven documentary editor. I like to develop really great characters. And so, you know, you can interview the editor that you're going to be working with, that you might want to work with, or maybe interview a few different editors, and you can ask, like, you know, well, what are your values, and, you know, how do you like to tell stories, you know, and I think that should give you some insight if you think the editor is going to mesh with your vision. And Heidi, why don't you you know, add something, because you definitely
I've definitely jumped on projects, maybe not as a polish, or maybe they thought I was going to be the polish, but they were very far. They had just had like a rough cut screening or something that scared them to death, and everybody trashed their film that they thought was perfect, and they're like, we need a new direction. And with that, I mean, a lot of people, if you're at that point, a lot of people share the film and say, hey, what do you think of it? And that's a good way of kind of getting a sense of if your editor and you are going to be on the same page. You know, I think a lot of the working relationship is about, like, can you have a cup of coffee with this person? Are you going to be able to freely discuss ideas? But yeah, I've worked on a number of films where, you know, part of the interview process was me watching the movie and giving them my thoughts, and a limited amount of thoughts, you know, because at some point it becomes, if there's too much feedback, it's like, wait a minute, shouldn't you be paying me for my time? Like, how detailed notes are we giving? You know, but things I thought could be improved, or ways I would try to help fix the story, and asking their vision, and just from that conversation, you can kind of get a sense if you want to work with somebody or if you don't want to work with anybody. I mean, a lot of editors are pretty humble people, I think. I don't know. You know, it's like, because you're behind the scenes and you never really, you know, you don't edit documentaries and become famous. So yeah, so I think you should probably cast a wide net, and then you see who you meet and who you might connect with.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to add is that, something that Heidi and I have talked about, and something that Heidi has insisted that I do, and I'm going to do what she tells me to do because she's the editor most of the time.
Oh no, I'm scared what you're gonna say.
Is as you said you really wanted me to do some screenings, some test screenings of the film to get feedback from audiences. And I think the thing is that if you do a number of test screenings with audiences, you know, you may end up seeing similar feedback, you know, and so that would probably also, you know, help push you in the right direction, you know, in terms of like maybe the type of editor that you want to work with. I don't, you know, if that helps. I hope it does.
Yeah, my rule is with test audience screenings, great for identifying problems, not so great at coming up with solutions. So that's the quick pitch I give to everybody, you know, like, and somebody can dominate the conversation real fast, but you'll see sometimes there's one-off person, and that person actually might have the key to everything, or they might be completely nuts. But if you start to see a repeated pattern of things, then you know it's a problem and you need to address it.
I think that that's some solid advice right there. Does anyone else have some questions? Or Kristen, did that answer your question, or is there anything else?
Yeah, so is it possible to get somebody who can also do the supervision that I was discussing with this, you know, they deliver, typically an editor would be delivering to a post audio sound editor, right? And dealing with the the EDL list and those sorts of things.
So
yeah. I mean, I don't know about all editors, but I know for myself, I'm like, whenever I'm going to a sound mixer, even if we're at a post finishing facility, or if it's just some guy in his basement, like I'm in my basement, I'm always like, it's me or the AE who's making those files and handing it over. And usually by this point in the job, unfortunately, they've decided that they don't need an AE, which is crazy because it's the time you need the AE most. Yeah, I would think that an editor who knows how to would know how to do that, or should know how to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Does anybody else have any burning questions? Feel free. No? Well, okay, so then I would love to talk a little bit more about this editor-director relationship. And this is basically inspired by a conversation that Heidi and I just had. And not naming any names, but it can often be a relationship where you butt heads and you disagree. And I've certainly had these kind of relationships with a director before. So yeah, let's talk about those points of contentions and how to work through conflicts with the director. I mean, I think it's without fail, you're going to disagree. I mean, I'm looking forward to the moment where I'm going to disagree with you, Heidi. So far, we haven't disagreed on anything, but we haven't really gotten into the nitty gritty yet. So, but there are going to be moments like without fail. So why don't, Heidi, why don't you like maybe briefly tell a little bit of a recent story, that you've had?
Well, I don't know if I should talk about my current project, but yeah, okay, so I guess when I was younger, when I edited and I disagreed with somebody, I would really stick to my guns. But now that I'm done this a while, I find that if I disagree with somebody on something, why not just try it? It's a non-linear editing system. I can always duplicate a sequence. I can always go back. Doesn't hurt anything. Let's just try it. In fact, sometimes trying it and showing people why it doesn't work is like the quickest answer to the problem. Other times it does work and you get your eyes opened up as the editor. You don't always have the solution. So I'm a big fan of trying things that I don't think are going to work. Even if, just to give it a go. I also, when I'm really confused by a director and what their vision is, I ask a lot of questions. Like, what's not working for you? Why are you seeing that note? And then sometimes I try to say things like, well, this is what it means to me and why I think it's important and valuable. Like, I don't know, I had a line in for my latest movie where it was like, I liked the line because it meant something different to me than the director had ever heard. And once I explained it, she's like, oh no, I'm totally sold on that. And the same thing, vice versa, she's done with me. So yeah, I think just everybody taking a step back and taking a breath and trying to actually physically work on the problem rather than just talk about it in theoreticals, and then you can move through it. And I have a luxury of doing that because I work on documentaries and I do not cut reality television, and I imagine in reality that it's a lot different, but I do primarily doc features. So it's oftentimes a very close working relationship between the director and the editor. And so you have to develop a working relationship, because if you don't, the film is definitely going to fail. I mean, the film could fail already enough. It's got enough stacked against it being an independent documentary film, but you don't want to get in the way. So.
Yeah, and one of the other ways to avoid conflict, I think, is, often offering a number of options, because sometimes an editor will see something like, this is just not going to work. But it's hard to communicate that to a director. So you kind of have to jump in and say, well, here's some options, and I usually, when I offer like 3 different potential solutions, then the director has an opportunity to pick, like, oh, let's go with this one, and that often works for me. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the documentary world and the television, if you're editing like reality or like a true crime show with a very fast turnaround like I'm doing right now, sometimes I'm just like, I just need to do whatever the director wants me to do, because it's just going to be the fastest way through that conflict. But yeah, anyway, any other questions? I see Amy Zins. Yeah, or Amy Ami has
Yeah, it looks like she put her question in the chat.
Yeah.
Hi there. Yes, I had also put it in a chat. Sorry, I'm on the road, so I'm doing by phone and Zoom. But I was just wondering, and forgive me if this was answered already, but would it be helpful for directors to hire and put on an editor, at least in light mode at the beginning, to work out any issues around logging, what would be helpful, so that they're already creating a strong foundation for how they will work together once the footage is ready?
Yes.
Include and sound also, and to bring the sound person in on those meetings also.
Yeah,
Is that
definitely. We were giving you thumbs up. You just couldn't see it because you're driving. But I think having an editor, consulting your editor who you're going to go with at the beginning of the workflow, is so many times I wish people had done that. In fact, on my last job, on the job right now, we just decided how we were finishing. They shot everything 4K, but they shot it 4096 by 2160, and I thought, oh, and they said, we want to do film festival serve, but I thought, perfect, this will do the 2048. But nobody ever told me that the DP shot everything to be framed 16 by 9 until like a week ago. I've been on this thing for 7 months. This is the type of stuff you can avoid, right? Like from the get-go. Like she didn't understand that, like, because I've delivered to a lot of film festivals, and I happen to know that the DCP film aspect ratio is different than what will be sent to Netflix, but she didn't know that. And so it was like a simple problem that could have been fixed, that could have saved a lot of heartache, but here we are now, and I asked questions when I got hired, but at that point, so much had already been in the can, and it was like too late to solve. So I would say even before you really start shooting, if you can get your editor in to talk about workflow, and set up some guidelines. Things can always, I work in docs, so things always change, but yeah.
The other thing is, it not just from a technical standpoint. I hired Heidi very early on. I had only started filming in 2019, and then this film festival was in winter of 2020, in January of 2020. And as soon as I saw the film, I, contacted her, and I just said, hey, I'm got this bat film with these women scientists. Are you in? And she's like, hey, this sounds interesting. I think I'm in. But we've been working together ever since. And so I still had, we just wrapped principal photography in September of this year. So over the course of, 3 years, yeah, I guess I've been, on and off working with Heidi. Like, she edited the trailer, which I wanted to show to you. If we have time, I can still show it. And she edited the trailer. This was, before COVID happened. Then the story changed of the bat film because COVID happened, and then I could no longer tell a story about bats without talking about COVID. So I really appreciated being able to have the editor to kind of talk to about where the story is going. And Heidi kind of knows where the story is going now. She's not going to be jumping into editing this film without really knowing what the ending is, because she and I have talked about the ending already. And I feel, like being on both sides. So I've been in the editor's seat working with a director who had no idea where their film was going. And we're talking about documentary here, not scripted. And I've also been a director of a scripted film, and so I can talk about that as well. But anyway, I've worked with directors of documentaries who had no idea where their film was going, and I had to kind of like push the film in a certain direction, and then they would respond like, no, that's not what I wanted. Well, it's like, well, you have to tell me what you want, So anyway, so I've found it really helpful every time we've had a little like shift in the story that I'm telling. I found it really helpful to have Heidi there all along the way, helping me make some decisions about where the story is going. It looks like we went back into a very large room. Are the breakout rooms over? Everybody's shaking their head yes. Well, great. I hope they were all fantastic. I need to look at the agenda, or maybe Carol or Amy wants to take the mic from me, please. I think Christina. Is there any more Q&A?
Yeah, I think that what we're supposed to be moving on to next is just kind of like any extended Q&A. If any.
Kristen wanted to show her
Yeah.
trailer, and we'd all love to see it if you could show it really quick.
Oh, okay. Well, if you guys want to check out the trailer, because we didn't have time before we went into breakout rooms. But we just had a really great discussion in our breakout room about the director-editor relationship. And as I mentioned earlier, Heidi Zimmerman is here. And she's the editor for my my feature documentary that I'm directing. And the film is called The Invisible Mammal. And it's a film about bats in North America and some amazing women in science who are working to protect them from extinction, save them from extinction. So I'm going to stop talking, and Amy, if you want to play the trailer, and then everybody make sure you're muted. And I'm also going to turn my video off.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Amy, I think that you just joined when Kristen was talking, but could you play her clip?
Yeah, if you can play the trailer for my Invisible Mammal film.
Yeah.
Okay.
You bet. What perfect timing. And then someone asked if I could close the breakout rooms. So
I think they're closed. I think everybody's in the main room again.
Yes, they are closed.
It looks like there's still a few people, so.
Yeah, but our last 10 minutes, we're going to do our raffle soon, and we're going to watch your trailer, which I'm really excited about.
I'm so excited. So someone did close the room.
Oh, it says breakout rooms will close in 54 seconds.
Yeah, there's still a few lingering.
Yeah, why don't you start playing the trailer, and then people can, pick it up when they join.
Sounds like a plan. Here we go.
A bat is a winged creature. I see him as like a mix of like some sort of bug and then a big flying bird, then maybe like tiny dragon.
When you get to know bats and you get to spend time with this really fascinating group of organisms, you quickly fall in love. And bats do all sorts of interesting things, from having unique sensory modalities of using echolocation, being the only mammals that can fly.
What they do is so positive. It helps people and helps the environment. I just think they're beautiful and misunderstood. They're awe-inspiring for these little mammals.
White nose syndrome was first detected around 2007. At that time, what we knew was that something terrible was happening. When biologists were going underground to count bats, there were just piles of dead bats.
There used to be so many hibernating little brown bats in the area. There are caves that had tens and hundreds of thousands of bats.
The numbers just plummeted.
It's always a magical moment anytime we get to kind of hold a bat in our hand or even see them do their thing. It never gets old.
Special, yeah.
The hope all along is that we'd find something that would help bats survive.
In places where we have survivor populations of white nose, those survivor populations started hibernation fatter.
How do we get these bats fatter in these areas? We know that insects are attracted to lights.
We are putting up light lures to attract flying nocturnal insects.
Let's go up about halfway.
So they can have an all-you-can-eat insect buffet before going into hibernation.
It's so rewarding to be part of looking for a solution.
Seeing these bats that are persisting or surviving does give us some hope.
The bats that are left really need as much help and support as they can get.
As humans, there's an imperative for us to try to help those other species on the planet.
It's just amazing to see what God has created.
Okay. So again, props to Heidi for editing the amazing trailer in 2020. And I can't wait to continue working with you. And there's your little, your child. Oh yeah, no, we got kids and yeah, everybody bring their kids and dogs and cats and stuff now. Any other questions? You know, I don't know how much more time we have before we do the raffle. I think
we need to do it now.
Okay, then no more questions. I hope you guys enjoyed that sample.
Yeah.
I'll leave my email address in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to me.
Great job, Kristen.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen. And thank you to all the panelists who gave up their time to be with us tonight. Well, I didn't get a chance to mention this beforehand, but we are having a raffle, so don't leave yet. And what we're going to be doing is we have a spinning wheel graphic that Christina will put up, and I think everybody's name is going to be on it except the panelists and the board members, because there's a lot of people on the wheel, and then you can't see anybody's name. The pie slice will be too small. So we will. Are
you ready?
Yeah. So the prizes are, we're going to be doing this 3 times, and the prizes are $10 gift cards to Amazon. So let's share your screen. So does everybody see their name up there? Is there anybody who does not see their name up there that wants to be in the drawing? Okay, nobody's saying anything. So I guess that means everybody's name is up there that wants to be on there. So let's do the first spin to see who will win. And if you gave me your email address, you gave your email address when you signed up. So we'll be sending the prize to that email address unless you tell me in the chat that you want it sent somewhere else. Okay.
All right, we ready?
Yep. Here we go. Here we optimized for sound. Here we go. Yay! Is it Ideal or Idle? Is that how you pronounce your name? Are you there? Everybody should be here. If you're not here, then you can't win. Okay. I'm looking.
Okay, we'll do it again.
I see him.
Oh, I see Ideal.
See them.
Idle. I see that person there. Okay, well maybe unmute yourself. And
They said their audio isn't working. So
okay.
But they made a chat. They said that they're here.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so congratulations, Ideal. Okay, let's go for our next $10 Amazon gift card winner. So if her name comes up again, we'll spin again. Here we go. Jen H. Yay. Jen H. Let's see. Do I see you here?
Somebody said that's me, Jen Harper.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh, there you are.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yay. All right. Great. Okay, and for our last $10 winner, gift card winner. Ashley K.
Hey, thank you. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Okay, great.
Congrats to all the winners.
Thank you.
And it was an honor being nominated.
So that's where that concludes our meeting tonight. But I think Julie has a couple of more remarks to give before we close out the night.
Yes, thank you, Carol. And thank you, Kristen. Thank you all for coming this evening. We really appreciate you being here at Women in Film, San Francisco Bay Area. We are empowering and promoting and celebrating women's creative work. And, you know, our mission is to provide critical support on creative works and to deliver useful solutions. So we really hope that tonight you felt that this was very useful, because it was extremely insightful and educational. And, you know, I really want to just say thank you so much to Kristen Tish for organizing such a wonderful evening. And a shout out one last time to Karen Larson and Associates, because her support is always, and the associates there is priceless and heartfelt. Our next Women in Film meeting will be November 9th, and we also are going to have an event called Plan Like a Boss in November. It's going to be the last week, just before the week before Thanksgiving. So I'll get you the date as soon as possible on that. We also have a pitch panel at the end of January. And so we're looking forward to seeing you in some of our events. And thank you. We really appreciate your time. And we know that you all have families and things you want to do. So go do them, and get a good night's sleep. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Thank
Bye.
you for coming.
Yay.
Yay, that was successful.
That was a great night. I had such a good time in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, very educational, and I love her trailer. It's beautiful.
All the work was just amazing. So much great knowledge. Really good job.
Yeah, Kristen did a good job. Okay,
Yeah,
guys, good night.
Good night, everyone.
Let my
Bye.
family off the hook and have the living room back.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.